All right, so today we will turn to a very special moment in the context of Isaiah. Yesterday we received the word of Isaiah concerning those who receive the word of God. That is, the people, right? The people. That's what where we were yesterday. The way the people is understood in the context of Isaiah, the remnant, Israel, right? And so today what we will do is that we will go to a very special accent in the book of Isaiah, and that is what I will call the messianic accent. Right? And you have already said that, maybe we should repeat. There is in the book of Isaiah a unique emphasis of messianism. What do we mean by when we say messianism? Messianic, right? If you ask, you have to realize that when you use the word Messiah, Mashiach, for the Jew of the time of Isaiah, it meant perhaps something slightly different than it would mean today for us. You would walk in the streets of Jerusalem and come across a Messiah. So Messiah is not, for the Christians, when you use the word Messiah, you mean, Jesus Christ. For the Jews, when you use the word Messiah, you have in mind someone who will come and bring peace into the world, right? But in the time of the Bible, the Mashiach could be just anything. And when I say anything, I mean more than just anyone. You see, anything can be Mashiach. That means anointed for a special purpose. But then in the book of Isaiah especially, there is a messianic idea, messianic hope, which actually has really been very emphasized. And when we mean by messianic hope, that means really this hope in a new era. You remember that in the context of Isaiah, and this is what the prophet, we are in the 8th century BC, this is the context when the prophets, not only Isaiah but other prophets, would come and speak to Israel and say, well, you are now well settled, but you see, someday you will be expulsed, someday you will be exiled. But so that is the word, of Isaiah to the prophet, to Israel, right? You will be exiled. Why? Because this is the judgment of God because of your particular situation. And this is when you read the prophets of the time of the 8th century. When Israel was, apparently at least well established, right? Had become a bit of a bourgeois. They had their vineyard, they had their houses. This is the 8th century. Then the prophet comes, he says, well, there is iniquity, but therefore you will be judged. You see, this is the first part of Isaiah. And the second part of Isaiah, of course, but beyond, of course, the judgment, there is something else. There is hope. There is hope that from the exile they will return. And then from this return, from this remnant, Isaiah takes off and dreams of another era, which is beyond the political situation, right? Beyond the walls of the city of Jerusalem at that time. And so, this is what we mean when we say messianism, right? We are thinking, Isaiah is thinking of something else. It's not just a political restoration. He's talking about, when you read some passages, about a cosmic restoration. Okay, so when we are trying to understand, we are trying to receive the messianic view in the book of Isaiah, we can see that there are two poles. It follows actually the structure of the book of Isaiah. You remember when we studied the structure of Isaiah, we had two focuses, right? Two foci, right? Depends on how plural you are putting here. Two poles. One around Ahaz, and the second one around Hezekiah, right? So the first pole, this is in Isaiah 1. You have here a messianic reflection, a messianic lesson. When we read this first chapter, which is around, the first miracle, we have actually a symmetry in the book of Isaiah. Remember that? This symmetry, some kind of two emphasis, right? Almost like a polarization, two faces in the book of Isaiah. This is why we are talking about the Isaiah 1 and Isaiah 2. It seems so different. And yet there is something, in common. There is a symmetry between the two. You have two miracles. First miracle around Ahaz. This is a miracle of a birth. A birth which is not expected, which is the result of a supernatural action, right? And the second one, which is in the second part of Isaiah, there is another miracle. And that is the miracle of Hezekiah, who was supposed to die, and he didn't die. And he was healed. And so you can see that those two kings who actually met with the prophet were used as a starting point of a messianic dream. Okay, they were actually it's as if those two miracles, those two announcements, those two encounters were used by Isaiah as a springboard for something else. All right, so this is what we have. So the first messianic accent in the book of Isaiah evolves around chapter 7 and chapter 11 until chapter 11, what has been called by those who read those texts the Emmanuel prophecy. This is the text which talks about Emmanuel, this whole prophecy that Emmanuel means, God is with us, right? So you have this in chapter 7. This is the name of that child. We will talk about that in a minute. And then beyond that, as we go into the reading, we have the description this whole Emmanuel prophecy ends up, it goes through chapter 9 and then goes to chapter 10 and then 11, and then it says, there shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse. That is really there will be someone coming out from the stem of the father of David, and from David, someone will come out, and it says here that the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. The word, you have all those attributes, you have 7 times, by the way. Kind of an emphasis, rhetorical rhythm here to speak about this person coming out of David, who would receive a sevenfold portion of the Spirit. And then right after that, you have this classic, messianic classic. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat. The cow and the bear shall graze, and so forth, right? So in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall stand as a banner to the people, for the Gentiles shall seek him, and so forth. All right. So in other words, this is and then the second one is and then you end up you read this. You come up with after that you read chapter 12, and you have a praise. In that day you will say, "O Lord, I will praise you. Thou you were angry with me," and so forth. "Therefore with joy you will draw water," and so forth. "Sing to the Lord, for he has done excellent things." All right. So cry out and shout, O inhabitant of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel. In your midst, the presence of the Lord. So the Emmanuel theme here, concluding this whole section, and which actually is concluded with a praise for what God has done, right? So this is the first pole of Messiah. And then the second one is found in the second part of Isaiah, and that is around a king this time who suffers, who is about to die, and there are some, you can compare the two kings. One is in good health and he doesn't need God, and the other one is going to die, and therefore he's responding to God, right? The first one refuses the sign which was proposed by God. The second one asks for a sign to God. Okay, so there are a number of parallels and symmetric points between the two. And in that section, we have the story of the suffering servant, okay, and coming out around Isaiah 53, right? And so we have here, apparently when we look at those two poles, it's almost we have two faces of the Messiah. One which is given in connection to a birth, and the other one which is given in connection to a death. One which is given, which takes us into the context of glory, of a king, and the second one which takes us in the context of a humiliation, of someone who hides his face. All right. So, and these are those two poles which I would like to address. These are the two messianic accents, the two faces. This has so much been, striking, that in Jewish tradition, there have been a tradition about two faces of messiahs, even two messiahs. A messiah who would be glorious, king of David, like a king, and a messiah who would be humble, would be a leper. Right? So you have those two faces, two aspects, and I will come back to that. So what we will do here for the moment, today at least, we will look at the first accent. And that's the one which is found in the first section of Isaiah, and that is in the context of the encounter between Ahaz and Isaiah. You remember that story, right? When Ahaz was met by the prophet Isaiah, and Isaiah, because there was a threat coming from the north. From the Israel and from Damas, and so Isaiah says to the king, "Well, don't worry, do not fear. All right, just ask for a sign, and you will see that God is going to respond to you." And Ahaz says, "I don't need a sign. I don't want." Actually, there are a number of indications that Ahaz was not. Simply unconscious. He had already prepared something. He had apparently. We have especially in Isaiah in I think it's 2 Kings 16. We have an indication 2 Kings 16 that he had already sent messengers to Assyria. Assyria, which was being. You remember that the north Israel. And Damas, right, wanted Ahaz to join the coalition to go against Assyria, right, because they were afraid of Assyria coming. And so what did Ahaz do already? Political. He had already sent some messengers to Assyria to try to gain him, with some gifts, right? 2 Kings 16. So that when Ahaz says, "Don't worry, you will not," he had already made his plans. He had already established his political basis, right? So therefore he said, "Well, I don't need," he didn't say it, but implicitly by saying, "Well, I don't need the sign, I don't want this." He didn't need anything. So therefore he was just relying on himself, on his politics, right? So therefore, the text says, therefore, when he says, "I will not ask," I will test the Lord. It sounds very orthodox. I will not test the Lord. It sounds so orthodox. We have a number of passages of the Bible. He will not do that. So he's just claiming of these passages to justify his position. And but Isaiah understands, and he says, "Well, if you don't want to have a sign from God, if you don't want to rely on God, therefore, the Lord Himself will give you a sign. Therefore," again, "a virgin shall conceive and bear a son." That's phrases which, of course, we may wonder, what it means. Just looking at the text. Therefore, because you don't want to be involved. You remember the story we have behind. There was a problem there was a big problem because the dynasty of David was threatened. Ahaz, you remember, the king Ahaz had received messages from the north, that is Damas and Israel. If you don't join us, we will replace you, so that there will be another person on the throne of David, on the throne of Judah, which will not be a Davidic. You see, so the Davidic dynasty, and by extension, by implication, the Messianic hope was threatened, right? And so it's as if Ahaz doesn't want to be a part of it. He says, well, no, I don't need it. And therefore, says, well, you don't want? Okay. Therefore, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Right. There are two questions here when you read this phrase, short phrase. First question: who is who is this woman? Who is this virgin? Is she the prophet's wife? Is she a king's wife, Ahaz's wife? Right? The text doesn't seem to. The text right away at this time, right? When you read the text, doesn't say that, right? Now about the child. Who is this child? And by the way, before I ask even that question, what does he mean? What does the text mean by when you read the text virgin? By the way, if you read other translations, you will see a young woman. Right? Here in King James Version, in the King James Version, which is a Christian tradition version, written by a Christian, of course he has in mind the fulfillment, in the New Testament. So he has in mind the Virgin Mary, right? So therefore it may be, this translation is suspect. Do we have here really a virgin? Or just a young woman, as you may read in other translations, including some Jewish translations, and also some Christian translation. Okay? That's also another question you have to ask yourself. And the second question, who is this child? A child, a son, by the way, who will come out of this, will be born. Is he the child of a prophet? Is the son of a prophet? Or is he the son of a king? Ahaz or Hezekiah? Right? So these are the two questions we want to address today. Okay? So the first question then is about the virgin. Right? This idea of virgin. And this first question is, first of all, a linguistic question. Right? We have, in the Hebrew text, we have the word alma. All right? That's the text we have. And the first observation which is made, and this is the word alma, which has been translated in some of the Bibles, English Bible or other language, by a virgin. But in some other places, it is also simply a young woman, who would not be necessarily a virgin. Could be, but not necessarily. Right? So this, therefore, there is a question mark here. Right? Who is this woman? Is she really a virgin? So the first question has to do with Alma. And so there are some people who say, well, if really Isaiah meant virgin, why didn't he use the technical word in Hebrew for virgin? And that is the word betula. Right? I'm going to write it here. Betula. Right? Which is really the technical word for virgin. Why didn't he use that? So therefore, he used a word which could be ambiguous, and therefore he's not necessarily implying that this woman is a virgin, since he used another word rather than betula, which is the technical word for virgin. He used the word alma, which means also a non-virgin woman. Okay, so that's the first problem we are having here. Okay, so we need to address that. First of all, and so we are going to try to respond to that question. First of all, we have to say that it is not correct to say that Betula is unambiguously is a word which means only virgin. Betula means also a young woman, who would not be virgin. All right. So that's the first thing we need to indicate. For instance, in the Hebrew Bible, we have 51 occurrences of Betula. Okay, 51 occurrences of the word Betula in the Hebrew Bible, and 3 out of those 50, from this 50, means really virgin, for sure. No ambiguity here. I have the text here. It's Leviticus 21:13, Deuteronomy 22 verse 19, Ezekiel 44 verse 22. All right. So only these 3 are clearly, the context and really the phrase is clearly, really no ambiguity. This is a virgin. And and then we have actually outside of the Bible, of the biblical document, we have in Ugaritic literature. What is Ugaritic? Ugaritic is a civilization which is very close geographically and culturally to the civilization of Israelites in the north of Palestine. Actually, if you see the island of Cyprus, if you just figure out the island of Cyprus, the island of Cyprus ends up with a big nose like this. You just prolong the nose and you reach Ugaritic civilization, in the north part of Palestine. And we have observed, because Ugaritic, the language, the civilization, it's very close. The language is almost the same like Hebrew language. Simply they simply use a cuneiform, but it's the same language. It's an alphabetic language. It's almost if you know Hebrew, you are able to decipher the cuneiform. It's the same thing. Anyway, the reason I'm referring to that is that in Ugaritic literature, right, which is they use the same language, they have the same cultural background. In Ugaritic literature, we have the word Betula, which doesn't mean at all a virgin. Actually, we talk about the goddess Anat, who happens to have had sexual intercourse repeatedly, and she is called Betula. So you cannot have, knowing that she had, sexual intercourse several times, he used the word Betula to characterize her. She's not a virgin, right? So you have, and when the argument saying, well, why didn't he use the word Betula, which is the technical word for virgin? If he meant really a virgin, he should have used the word Betula. No, doesn't work, because the word Betula itself is ambiguous. It doesn't mean 100% Betula. On the other hand, when you look at the word Alma itself, it is true that Alma may be sometimes understood referring to a woman who is not virgin, but in the great majority of cases, we could say that Alma is a young woman who has never been married. Actually, we have no case of an Alma in the Bible who has been married. Now, in the context of the Bible, biblical civilization, right? It's not our civilization. She has not been married. That really means that she has not been touched by a man. She was a virgin. But anyway, but in spite of this, of course, we could discuss perhaps a couple of occurrences where the word Alma is used and could perhaps imply that the woman is not virgin. And so you may ask yourself the question, why, okay, we have Betula and we have Alma. It's true that Betula is attested as meaning also the virgin. Just as Alma is attested to mean also the virgin. But why did he use the word Alma rather than the word Betula? The word Betula, which was very well known. This is a word, the technical word, which was used. So is it because it didn't mean it had to do with the woman itself? Actually, it comes from another reason, which I want to share with you here. It's very simple. The reason for this choice is the fact that Betula, in the context of Isaiah, you need to understand that within the context of Isaiah, it's true that the word in Isaiah you have two words for the virgin. You have the word Betula and you have the word Alma. Those two words are found. So Isaiah knew about those two words, but yet he preferred to refer to that word. And you may ask yourself, why didn't he use the word Betula for the women? Very simple. The word Betula in the context of Isaiah is always referring to Israel. It has a corporate meaning. So this is the word which Isaiah has chosen to refer to Israel. So if he has someone else in mind who would not be, the corporate Israel, so he uses another word. So it was, in other words, to make sure that we are not confused. So we have actually the word Betula appears 4 times in the book of Isaiah, and in all the 4 texts, Isaiah 23 verse 12, 37 22, 47 verse 1, 62 verse 5, the word Betula is always referring to an archetype of the people of Judah. So he preferred, Isaiah, to take the word Alma rather than Betula in order to avoid the possible confusion with other meaning of Betula. That's as simple as that. So that's the reason he chose that. Not because this one means virgin, because this one means a non-virgin and this one means a virgin. Well, both of them mean virgin. But he preferred to use that one so that we are not confusing. We know that he's talking about a particular woman. We are not, and not really Israel itself as an entity. Now, it's interesting, by the way, that the same word, Alma, technical word Alma, has been found in extra ancient Near Eastern literature, again in the Ugaritic literature. And I'm going to write on the board the phrase which has been found there. It says this, and it is we have a virgin, this is the word Betula which is used here. A virgin will give birth. This is in the context of pagan culture, right? This is a context of mythological language, a myth, right? And it's an oracle by a prophet of Ugaritic culture, and this is what we find: a virgin shall give birth, a young woman. Okay, and here we have the word Alma, so you have the 2 words used here. Will bear a son. Okay, this is an oracle, right? And as you can see, it's a parallelism. He's saying the same thing with other languages. You have a Betula, Alma, will give birth, will bear a son. And so, in the context of that oracle, it is very clear that this oracle means really virgin. Doesn't refer to a young woman who is not virgin, because he's talking about something supernatural. It's in the context of. So maybe Isaiah knew about this myth here, and he's using that belief here to convey something else, right? So it's something, it's an idea which was familiar to him. But what is interesting, at least, whatever interpretation we give to that, is the fact that you have, linguistically, if you take the testimony, linguistic testimony, you have this outside of the Bible, in Ugaritic literature, the word Alma and Betula, both of them are used as meaning a virgin here. So the word Alma is clear, referring to it's the same person being a virgin. All right. So that's the first argument we have to consider. Now there is another perhaps logical argument. When Isaiah speaks to Ahaz, and he says, God is going to send you a sign. The virgin will give birth. Now we wonder if it is a sign, and if it was just a young woman, in what sense it's a sign? Because any young woman would give birth. It's not a sign from a supernatural action. So the fact that God is going to give you a sign of something very special, therefore the virgin will give a birth, he implies something special about that woman who is not ordinary. All right. So we will come back to that when we come to the next point, and that is the supernatural birth, the supernatural child who is coming. The first observation we are making here is that the supernatural character of this birth. I'm coming to the next point about who is that child. What characterizes this child? Right? Is he the son of a prophet? Is he the son of a king? Who is that? Right? And what kind of birth are we talking about? Right? So this is the kind of question we need to address when we read the text. And so the first thing we are learning right there, as Isaiah speaks to Ahaz, the very name already is suggesting something, right? Which emphasizes the supernatural character of this birth. God with us, right? Emmanuel. So that suggests already from in the very name that we are dealing here with the fact that this child, it's the name. It's not a name given by accident. It's not a name which is given because of the nice sounds or because of the uncle I loved. It's a name which is given by God, which has a prophetic meaning, right? That means it has a prophetic intention, and therefore we need to take this meaning seriously. And what is the meaning? God with us. Okay? So this is a child which is the birth. That particular birth is supposed to be associated with the presence of the Lord among the people. Something really supernatural. Right? That's the first. That's the first observation we are making. So the purpose of this future birth, of this supernatural birth, is to assure Ahaz and to assure the people around him that that the history is going on, that there will be someone on the throne of David in spite of what is going on inside of, remember, the line of David, the dynasty of David, was threatened by those two kings who wanted to replace, right, the son of David, who was sitting on the throne. And so what Ahaz is hearing here right now, is hearing about something which is going to take place in the future. The presence of the Lord, this Emmanuel, this future Messiah on the throne of David, is in a way reassuring from the future, reassuring the sign from the future, reassuring the people who are in the present. See, in the present, they don't know. Is there going to be a Davidic heir on the throne? We don't know. What Isaiah is saying to him, don't worry. The very fact that there will be Emmanuel, there will be the Davidic Messiah in the future, is a guarantee from the future, a sign from the future, indicating that you can believe there will be someone. Okay? So that's the first observation we are making here, right? But still, we may wonder, who is? Is he really the Messiah we're talking about? Is he the prophet's son? Is he the king's son? Who is that? First of all, we need to say that this son cannot be the son of the prophet Isaiah, as it has been sometimes argued. Cannot be the son of the prophet Isaiah, for a number of reasons. First one, the prophet's wife had already a son. Remember? Isaiah 7 verse 3. Before Isaiah had spoken, had given to Ahaz this particular sign, the virgin will give birth, right? The prophet had already a son. He was Shar Yashuv, you remember, just a few verses before. So you had the son. So it's not a virgin then. She had already a son. So you cannot say, well, we are talking about the son of the prophet. The prophet had already a son, and we are talking about the virgin, and it's a person who was supposed to have a son for the first time. So that's just logical. The second thing, this is the name which is given by his mother, and this is kind of unusual. In Isaiah 7 verse 14, you read the text clear. This is the mother which gives the name. Of course, suggested by God himself, but this is the mother. The text, mother will call him Emmanuel, and not the prophet. Which, by the way, is a particularity, because when the prophet, when the prophet has sons, he is the one who gives the name. The father. You have the text in Isaiah 8 verse 3. The prophet gives the name of the son. So if it was his son, well, you have to expect that the prophet would give also the name. But in that instance, it's not the prophet, it's not the father, it's the mother, which is unusual. That suggests that there is something special about this birth. Also, this cannot be the king's son, the son of Ahaz. Well, this reference to the mother, who is giving the name, is all the more striking that Isaiah is speaking to a man. If Isaiah is speaking to the future father of this son, this is kind of a natural that the father would give the name of the son. But speaking to the man, to Ahaz, he says, there will be a birth, and this is the mother who will give a name. As if the father was excluded. And indeed the father is excluded, because the father doesn't want to have a son. He doesn't want to have the sign. You remember? He said, no, I don't want. And so to this father, who doesn't want to have a sign, who responded negatively to God's sign, to this father, right, the response is given. Therefore, because you refuse, and there is here, it sounds like an irony. There is an irony. I mean, the book of Isaiah, if you study, if you pay attention to there is a number of smiles, a number of irony. This is one of them. Since the king refuses to be involved in God's plan, the child will be conceived without his help, without any male's help. Right? A virgin will conceive. And Ahaz is therefore excluded as the father of that son. Okay? And of course, this prophecy speaks about a future birth, right? And therefore it cannot refer to Hezekiah, who apparently was already a few years old, maybe 9 years old at that time, the son of Ahaz. So it cannot be the son of Ahaz, it cannot be the son of Hezekiah, it cannot be the son of the prophet. So you may wonder, what is this? There is a third observation, which has to do with the way it has to do with the way this story, the way this oracle is given. And I'm referring here to perhaps a more literary observation. There are differences between this name, between this birth and the other names and the other births. The birth of the son of the king, the birth of the son of the prophet, and that particular birth. If you just, that's the first observation we are. First of all, as far as differences is concerned, if you look at it tells us also that there is an essential difference between this particular child and the other child, for instance, the children of the prophet. This child receive a name, which is what has been, and I'm going to put the word on the board because it's a technical word, Theophorus. Theophorus, this is not a word which you will use when you are having breakfast, right? Theophorus, Theos, God, Phorus, that means for, phero in Greek, that means bear. Bear is the name of God. You have many words, many names like this in the Bible where you have the name of God. Emmanuel is one of them. You have the word El in the name of God, right? Referring to God's presence, God being. And what is interesting is that Emmanuel is Theophorus. He has the name of God in it. Whereas, so it refers to the divine realm. While the name of the prophet's sons, they limit the vision to the political situation. Shar Yashuv means the rest will come back, will return. Maher Shalal Chaj Baz means speed the spoil, hasten the booty. So it has to do with the fact that, a war situation, a political situation. So the two names of the prophets refer to the political, to the local situation, to here. Emmanuel refers to the divine. Right? So in that sense, already with the giving of the name, you are aware, you learn that we have a name of a person who is different than the two other persons, the two children of the prophet. Also, unlike the other sons, all the other sons, whether it is the sons of the prophet or the sons of Ahaz, unlike the sons of those prophet or of Ahaz, Emmanuel's father is never identified, which is very unusual. Normally, when you talk about someone within the biblical civilization, you are the son of the father, you are not the son of the mother. No, this is very special here. So, and talking to a man saying, well, there will be a son, and then he refers to the mother, he's not referring to the father. So this is very suspect. And that shows again that there is something very different, essentially different between that king, that child, and the other children. Now there is another thing which I would like to share with you, another observation, and it has to do with the literary structure. And I'm going to explain this in a minute, of the divine address of this when we have that story, right, of Isaiah speaking. I'm going to write this on the board so that you can see that here. There is a very interesting difference I'm going to raise here. Sorry. Okay. Let me read the text in the Bible here. All right. Isaiah 7. I'm going to read from. We could read from verse 3 to verse 17, actually. This is a whole section from verse 3. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shar Yashuv, your son. So this is what we have. All right, we have the first section. I'm going to call it A. Okay? We have God is speaking to Ahaz. Okay? And he uses, by the way, the second person, masculine singular. All right, I'm just projecting, bringing to you what the Hebrew text is giving, right? And this is in verses 3 to verse 12. Okay, and here you have in that section, this first section, which I call A, from verse 3 to 12, we have a reference to Shar Yashuv. Okay? And this is a sign of hope from here. Bring Shar Yashuv, the little kid, with you, so that we know that rest will return. And then you have the threat from the kings. All right? And then we have, after this A, we have our text, which is right here. God is speaking, and he's speaking here to the house of David. House of David. Right, God to Ahaz, God to house of David. Here we have second person. Okay, masculine, plural. Here you had second person, masculine, singular, speaking to Ahaz. Here we have second person, masculine, plural, speaking to the house of David. Okay, and here, this is our text here, the future birth of Emmanuel. Okay. And then we have, after this, we have an A1, I call it, because you will see that it repeats some of the motifs we have found in the first section. So we have 3 sections in this whole passage. Okay, here I should give the reference. This is verses 13 to 14. This is really middle. And then here we have, again, God to Ahaz. Second person, masculine, singular. This is verses 15 to 25. Here we have a reference to a child. We don't know who it is. Okay, we have some indication that it is Shar Yashuv because it uses the same language. Anyway, and then we have this, it's the same kind of language, reference to a child. And then here we have the threat and also a deliverance. You see, here also we have deliverance. Threat plus deliverance. All right, from the kings, from the kings. When you observe the structure, there is something interesting. You observe when you speak to Ahaz, second person, masculine, singular. Right? It is the same thing in A. This is the same thing in A1. In the middle, he's speaking to someone else. He shifts from speaking to the king to speaking to the house of David. Why? Because the king Ahaz doesn't listen anymore. Right? Because now what's happening, there will be a birth without him. What is happening here concerns the house of David. It responds to the problem of the dynasty of David, which is threatened. So this is one of the reasons we are having that situation. There is a difference here in the structure, which is kind of indicating. Here we are talking as local, here in A and A1 we are talking about a local present history. But here it's in the future. There is no reference whatsoever to the present history. So it takes us beyond the borders of the present time here. Okay? So that is to say here, actually, that in B, right, that is here, right, the sign is not intended to Ahaz, is intended to the house of David. And this is why this birth is beyond the time of Ahaz himself. Right, so what is interesting now, we need to reach our conclusion here. What is interesting is that this whole section takes us to Isaiah 9, as I indicated, to Isaiah 11, where we have this vision of hope here. And what is interesting is that in Jewish tradition, in spite of the Jewish-Christian polemic, the understanding of that text is also attested in the sense of referring to someone special. In Septuagint, for instance, for the word Betula, they use the technical word for the Virgin Parthenos, and in Qumran also when the text is read, it says there is in Qumran a combination between Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 9, and referring to the Messiah here. Basically, what we have here is something really special, and it has to do with a Messiah who would actually bring, the presence of the Lord among us, Emmanuel. And I think, in conclusion, I would like just to share a few points about this unbelievable, that is the presence of God among us, the God with us. Right? This is not something which is, normal. And for the ancient Near Eastern culture, they believed in God, but in a God who just was in heaven. And if you read, even if you read, for instance, in the context of Daniel, you will see that, which is a Babylonian context, you will see that the Chaldeans are saying to Nebuchadnezzar, he said, well, this is something which belongs to the God of heaven. We have no access to that. So there was a separation. And what really marks the difference between the biblical view of God and the ancient Near Eastern view of God is that this God who is in heaven has erupted into the human sphere. So you have this whole idea of, how shall I call it, incarnation of God, right, which is really well attested in the Bible. So we should not be surprised to have this idea here. Actually, the Bible itself is a kind of incarnation of God, in a certain sense, where you have really the word of God Himself, which has found its way into the grammar, into the syntax, into the linguistic situation, into the words of the Bible. The history of Israel also is a testimony of the incarnation of God, where you have God, acting into history, being with the people, the Shekinah, right, leading the course of history. So this is not a new idea, but this is certainly an idea which is not, easy to understand. When we talk about also the birth of the Messiah, I mean, if you look at all those texts which are somehow related to the birth of the Messiah, you have all those births which are very special. You have it implies a supernatural intervention on God's part. You have an old Sarah who gives birth. You have a sterile Rebecca who gives birth. You have an unloved Leah. And you have even the adulteress Bathsheba, who just lost her first child because of adultery, who will give birth and who will be the ancestor of the Messiah. So when you look at and Ruth, the Moabite, who you were not supposed to have a relationship with her from Moab, and still she is a part of the. So you have a supernatural, something unusual, which is at work in births here. So this story about a virgin will give a birth. It fits very well. This should be a woman who is not normal, who is not ordinary, to indicate that there is a supernatural action here. All right. So this is, even by the way, even Jewish tradition has imagined this wonder of God's incarnation. Let me just tell you read the passage here, which I take from the Bereshit Rabbah. It says this, referring to the birth of Seth. It's not referring to that text, but there is something here which is quite interesting and somehow related to what we are talking about. Talking about Eve, when she had this son, Seth, she said, she called, this is what this text, this Jewish tradition is saying, she called him Seth, for she said, God has given me, and she uses the verb set, which means, put, she has given me another Seth, she has set, she has put, another posterity, which means, as Rabbi Tanchuma observed in the name of Rabbi Shamuel, that Eve saw the seed which comes from another place. Another place. What is it? The text says, that is the King Messiah, King Mashiach. So this idea of another seed, which is not a part of the regular organ, the regular channel, from another place, right? So this is an idea which was really a part of the of Jewish tradition. Now that all the salvation of the world, that all the universal wisdom, all the universal redemption would rest on one particular man, of course, this is very surprising, right? That all the divinity would dwell physically in a specific man, according to that text. This is something which, of course, is difficult. This is a scandal for the Greek. For the Greek, God is there and man is there. And the spirit and the flesh cannot be combined. But here we are really in the climax of really Hebrew thinking. And I could say, in a way, incarnation in that sense. The fact that God, goes and comes down and is born even. This is a part of Hebrew thinking. It helps us to understand the wonder of God with us. The presence of the Lord in history and in existence. The Shekinah that dwells among the people. And by the way, when you talk about that, you're not talking about a man who becomes God. That's not what we are talking about. And sometimes we forgot that misunderstanding. There is no such a thing as a man becoming God. There is no such a thing as a man claiming for God. This is God who becomes God, becomes human. It's not a human. And sometimes in Christianity we've had some kind of misunderstanding. We say, well, Jesus is God. No, Jesus is not God. God is Jesus. That's the way we should pronounce it. In light of what we are learning from the biblical testimony, this is God who comes down and not man who comes up. Right? And this is really what makes possible salvation. And this is what messianic hope is all about, is that the course of history didn't go by itself, blindly. God was present, is present in the course of history, and the very fact that he is present in the course of history, the very fact that he is Emmanuel, is a guarantee that the course of history leads somewhere. Thank you.